One of the hottest emerging technologies today is virtual reality, an experience where real life is simulated through CGI, with the effect of feeling quite real. These are generally done on HMDs, or head-mounted displays, a helmet-like device that projects the computer-generated imagery around you. Virtual reality, or VR, has developed into use in all kinds of industries. For the consumer, like you and I, we can play video games, travel, watch 360-degree videos, or meet some virtual friends. For businesses, it is used for flight simulations, police training, roller coaster simulators, practicing surgical procedures on virtual humans, and more. The uses are growing every day. But it wasn't always like this until 11 years ago, when a daring entrepreneur wanted to revive the possibility of VR, when people were still figuring out how to make HMDs and couldn't foresee their future uses fully. This is the story of Oculus VR and how they pioneered VR into what it is today. The story of Oculus indirectly starts many decades before 2009. The idea of virtual worlds had been around for a few centuries, but the technology wasn't around until the 1970s to create such a device that could let you walk through something virtual. But before this, simulators were the precursor to HMDs, tech that could recreate very real situations through an immersive medium. These began to appear since 1929, when the first flight simulator named the Link Trainer was invented. It was extensively used in World War II to train fighter and bomber pilots. Inventions within the space of virtual reality appeared from the 1960s onwards, where sporadic improvements were made until the early 2000s. 1960 saw the first ever head-mounted display. In 1961, the first HMD with a motion tracking system was built. In 1962, an arcade-style machine called the Sensorama was developed to simulate a whole range of sensors whilst immersed in film. This was a predecessor to today's arcade machines. The first computer-connected HMD was invented in 1968, which could project basic computer graphics. The 1970s and 80s saw early projects in advanced simulator systems and also VR gloves to detect finger movement. In 1993, Sega infamously attempted to create the first cheap consumer-friendly VR headset. Although the hardware inside was decent for the time, there were significant health risks to using the product, with product testers continuously getting strong headaches and feeling dizzy. It never reached the consumer market. Up until 2009, VR remained as a business-only venture for simulations and had rare instances in arcades in the 1990s. VR was still absent of a consumer-friendly option. A few had popped up in the early 2000s, but they had too many issues with things like high latency and very acute degrees of freedom. This brings us to a Californian entrepreneur who saw a gap in the market and decided to act upon it. Palmer Luckey was 17 years old in 2009 with an avid interest in electronics and engineering. Those passions of his led him to collect over 50 primitive head-mounted displays made over the past few decades. They were made from the likes of companies like Sega and Sony, who had dabbled in the industry with little breakthrough. Luckey stated that he was annoyed that there were no good VR headsets suitable for gaming for the average consumer. VR headsets at the time cost tens and tens of thousands and were only suitable for businesses. So, he took this into his own hands. Within the space of his garage, he started taking apart existing HMDs. Luckey discovered how they worked and modified them to try and optimize the headsets. However, he realized that he had to work from scratch at this point to create a truly great product. After founding the company Oculus, he developed the first prototype over the next year, called the Oculus Rift PR1. It had fixed so many problems that caused huge companies to fail and leave the industry. It had low latency, which stopped motion sickness. It also had a 90-degree field of view for more immersion, and more pixels in the display for sharper imagery, as well as reductions to the screen door effect. The Rift was on its way to becoming a global phenomenon. At this point, however, the headset was still a concept, and he needed to push further to get into the market. The next goal was development kits. They needed to rally video game developers to create content for their new device. They managed to get some of the biggest names in the video game industry alongside them.
What I've got now is, I honestly think the best VR demo probably the world's ever seen, because we're certainly going to take this into our future projects.
We're getting involved in Oculus now because we see an incredible opportunity here for game developers to experience something new.
The Rift is taking years of virtual reality research and putting it into a package that everyone can use.
So I recently had a chance in person to check out the Oculus headset, and needless to say, I'm a believer. Even as a prototype, what I saw was extremely promising. We're extremely excited here at Epic Games to get the Unreal Engine integrated with Oculus, and I think the possibilities for the games are extremely exciting, and I'm thrilled for the whole project.
Well, I gotta say, I just tried the Oculus prototype, and it was such an immersive, amazing experience that we pretty quickly, like within an hour, decided to get behind this project.
I got to meet Palmer Luckey and try out the Oculus Rift. And I have to say it was a very exciting moment. Could be the beginning of a whole new industry that leads us eventually to having true augmentation all the time, every place. And I'm really looking forward to getting a chance to program with it and to see what we can do.
It looks incredibly exciting. If anybody's going to tackle these set of hard problems, we think that Palmer's going to do it. So we'd strongly encourage you to support this Kickstarter.
In the past, I've looked at these VR headsets and head-mounted displays, and this is the first one that I've seen that I was truly impressed with.
Of particular note, John Carmack, a legendary game developer who was behind Doom, Commander Keen and the Quake franchises, had noticed the upcoming VR headset creator. He decided to team up with Palmer to create the first VR-ready title, a VR port of the game Doom 3 BFG Edition. Carmack also developed much of the software for the headset itself. This was going to prove a problem later down the line, but we'll get to that later. Luckey faced one issue for his ambitious project. He needed a large amount of funding, especially if he wanted to ship out a lot of developer kits to produce content. So he launched a Kickstarter in August 2012 for the Oculus Development Kit 1, or DK1, and it was one of the most successful Kickstarters to date, with $2.5 million USD raised from just under 10,000 backers. Thousands of game developers around the world were now sold on the idea of VR as the new holy grail of gaming. The hype surrounding the Oculus Rift immediately called for new fighters into the industry. Valve, HTC, Sony, and various small startups began flowing into VR, developing their own HMDs. But Oculus had already captured a huge portion of the market simply by being the first. In 2013, the DK2 was released with a vastly improved screen and also better contrast for more vibrant colouring. By February 2015, the original CEO of Oculus, Brendan Iribe, announced that 100,000 DK2s had been shipped, a huge feat for the company. But just before that, something even more unbelievable happened. The tech giant Facebook came knocking in 2014, and Palmer received a dream offer, even though his company had officially existed for only 2 years. $400 million in cold hard cash and $1.5 billion in Facebook stocks. This equated to 23 million shares, each worth about 65 USD at the time. Today, those stocks are worth about 4.3 billion US, with individual prices at around 187 per share as of the making of this video. During the acquisition, Mark Zuckerberg said to the Oculus board, quote, "Oculus has the potential to become the most social network ever," end quote. You know you've made it big when business giants come to your door. Facebook shares the original vision of Palmer Luckey for Oculus, to create consumer headsets for gaming for the average gamer. But of course, Facebook has much bigger visions than Luckey could have ever foreseen. Facebook wants 1 billion users of VR products within the foreseeable future. They want it to be used every day in the future, for tasks such as shopping, doctor's visits, simulations, interacting with friends, and more. The other purpose is, of course, to collect your precious data. Oculus now had the huge capital backing of their new parent company, Facebook, and was now in the driving seat to launch their first generation of headsets over the next few years. It started with their first consumer headset, the Oculus Rift CV1. It was released on March 28 in 2016 and boasted some impressive specifications. 94 degrees of freedom, 90 Hz refresh rate, OLED displays, a 1080 by 1200 pixel resolution per eye, and outside-in tracking through camera sensors. The success of the product let Oculus immediately begin development on their next projects, which would be revealed several years later and would continue to innovate in the industry. But with all great companies comes controversy. As Oculus began to revel in its triumph, controversy snagged the company, leading to a restructuring of leadership. Remember John Carmack, the Doom developer who joined Oculus in 2013? He was accused of using similar code in his Oculus software comparable to software made under ID Software, the company he co-founded. The parent company of ID Software, ZeniMax Media, ended up winning a copyright infringement lawsuit against Oculus for $500 million. But a far worse controversy struck the company, originating from the founder himself. Palmer Luckey ended up getting fired from the company. Luckey donated a large sum of money to a group called Nimble America, a political group that supported the 2016 Republican nominee at the time, Donald Trump. Ironically, the group was actually disliked on both sides of the political spectrum, on speculation that it was a scam and was committing fraud. The group has been disbanded since, and few traces of them can ever be found. Needless to say, the actions from Luckey were disapproved by many, and soon after, he disappeared from Oculus. Even some game developers were reluctant to port their games onto Oculus due to the scandal, and opted for HTC's platform Viveport and Microsoft's mixed reality portal. Luckey later confirmed to CNBC that he was fired by Facebook, but he was still happy that he sold off the company to Facebook, as it was in strong hands. With the controversies out of the way, in 2018 and 2019, the last three headsets of Oculus's first generation of products were coming. They too were going to bolster the industry and bring in millions more into the emerging world of virtual reality. The first was the Oculus Go, one of the first wireless headsets in the market capable of basic gaming. It was primarily taken up by businesses who wanted cheap headsets to develop work training for their staff, as well as newbie consumers who wanted a small taste of what VR had to offer. But the greatest success of Oculus to date was just about to arrive, something that would capture what VR would look like in the decades to come.
You can have more than one world to explore, because reality is yours to defy.
The Oculus Quest was the first true wireless gamer headset capable of running any VR game, albeit at a reduced power compared to the CV1. It made virtual reality even more immersive through getting rid of the wire and the outside sensors while still maintaining strong processing power, a good field of view, and decent resolution screens. Not only was this a great first buy for gamers, but the concept of virtual reality laser tag, where you can freely move around and game with others in a physical arena, was beginning to emerge worldwide, and it is on the rise today. The future was truly coming. But Oculus still wasn't done yet. They had one more announcement to make. The first generation of Oculus was ending with the Oculus Rift S, a new PC-powered headset, and it was great, for some. The image on the screen was sharper, the field of view wider, and the tracking was improved, but at big costs. It was arguably less comfortable, had terrible audio options, and ran at a lower refresh rate. For some, however, it was still the next best thing. Today, Oculus is most likely working on the next generation of headsets and hardware improvements, while simultaneously building a huge amount of content, including some exclusive content on their platform, as well as regular software improvements for all headsets. The story of Oculus VR has taught us that passion and determination to improve an industry can be done, and it can be done by anyone. Palmer was only 17 years old when he revived an entire industry which is worth billions and billions today, as people buy personal VR headsets and have fun within entertainment centers featuring virtual reality content. And with that, this video has come to a close. Let me know what other businesses you would like me to analyze and how I can improve my videos. I shall see you soon.